Waiting at Taylorville Estates Assisted Living. Click their icon at TaylorvilleDailyNews.com.
WTIM. You're listening to the WTIM Morning Show on your information station. The show is sponsored by People's Bank and Trust, where they put people first, and Landmark of Taylorville. I'm your host, Reed Kamai, and we're going to spend this interview talking about invasive plants in native forests. And whom better to talk about that with than Andrew Holsinger, a horticulture educator at the University of Illinois Extension. Andrew, thanks for coming on this morning.
Hey, good to be here.
Yeah, good to have you on as always, and I appreciate you coming in. We had a little bit of a switch there, kind of at the 11th hour, and so we appreciate having you on. So, yeah, in terms of invasive plants, right? These can be, they can be a nuisance, but they can be more than that, and I'd love to get your take on why that is.
Yeah, there's a difference whenever you have invasive plants, that they tend to somewhat go unnoticed for a while, and then you come to the realization of, like, I have a problem. There's invasive plants that are taking over, so it can creep up on you and really go unnoticed unless you're scouting and looking for the plants. And so it's a good opportunity any time of the year to be scouting for these plants, but they can be aggressive and they can be a nuisance. And we have several plants that pose problems. There's giant hogweed that can cause chemical burns. There's I see a lot of poison hemlock that has its toxic attributes. So thinking about looking for the invasive species, and some of these that are growing and about to set seed, it's good to think about removal before those seeds are set and ready to be dispersed, because they produce a lot of seed and you can avoid a lot of problems if you remove that seed before it continues for plants in the future.
And it sounds like it's sort of a be proactive, not reactive kind of strategy. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both, that you need to have a strategy whenever it comes to invasive plants, but that strategy sometimes is a little bit of research. So doing some research or attending a course about invasive plants, that not everything works for these plants. They're individual attributes. So if you had tree of heaven, and you have tree of heaven and you just take a chainsaw and you cut it down, well, then it resprouts from its root system and it suckers. And so then you not only have one tree of heaven that you used to have, now you have many, many more saplings that have started because of that removal. So there are cases when herbicides need to be used, but picking the right herbicide, knowing what concentration to apply whenever you're dealing with these invasive plants is important.
So the herbicides are something to consider as well. So something else that kind of comes to mind about invasive plants, right? Like you have different kinds of plants in Europe and Asia that work well in those environments. Then when you in some cases bring them to Illinois, it's considered invasive because of the way it works. Just talk a little more about that and why it works that way.
Well, there's kind of a check and balance whenever it comes to plants, that if they are in their native region, that would be a place where that particular plant occurs naturally. Well, there's often a check and balance of there's insects or diseases or something that keeps that from being so prolific where it's natively found. But whenever species of plants or insects or many of the others are brought over to a different environment, some of those things that keep that nuisance plant in check, they're not brought with it. So then you have an absence of those natural enemies, and we don't have those natural checks and balances that can be somewhat of a competition for the plant to keep it into check.
Interesting. So, just the way all that works with those kinds of plants. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the oak history or oak hickory forest, which has history, as I initially said at first, in Illinois, just a major part of its natural heritage. Now, there have been some non-native plants and other species that have kind of hindered the oak hickory forest, and I'd love to kind of learn a little more about that and kind of how everything you've described so far plays into it.
Yeah, with these invasive plants, they've really thrived sometimes in areas where they're more adapted to the shade, or they create shade whenever they're in the canopy of the forest. And so we have seen the ecology of oak in Illinois. You have these species that take over the understory of the forest, and then they're preventing that next generation of oak trees from growing. They kind of dominate those species, and so then you end up where there's no regeneration of the oaks because they've been shaded out or what have you with these invasive plants. And so then you have kind of a dying forest because these oak trees are mature, but there's nothing to replace them. And so we have a lot of native oak trees in Illinois, and we've had plantings of oak, hickory, savannas that the 4-H have been involved with to help promote kind of a restoration of the oak hickory forest in Illinois.
And in terms of that restoration work, I mean, whether it's a 4-H group or landowners or like organizations that sort of work on a volunteer basis in certain areas, to do that restoration work, whether it's for oak, hickory, or whatever, what is that process or cycle like as far as making it happen?
It is. It's not a single event that occurs that's going to be the end all be all for restoration. It's a strategic cycle of a disciplined approach of looking at the problem, these invasive plants. So you have to make a positive identification whenever you're dealing with plants, so you know that you're taking out the right plant. You're looking for the invasives, but they often have a native look-alike that can be somewhat confusing to the novice. You want to monitor and assess the work that you've done, and so keeping a watchful eye over your property. These invasive plants can have kind of satellite populations that it's going to take some labor to remove these, and that's why they're such a problem, is because of the difficulties that they have with removal. But with that removal, you're going to have kind of a consistent treatment plan. Make sure that you're not accidentally spreading these plants by seeds. They can cling to your clothing, your equipment, so making sure that you have good sanitation process, and then keep monitoring on your commitment to get rid of the invasives. And so you need to think about that seed bank and the things that you can do culturally to help prevent the invasives from growing.
And in terms of that sort of follow-up that you were talking about there at the end, like how long does that process take? Are we talking weeks or months, or how long?
It can be a multi-year commitment. It's they don't get started overnight, and they definitely take some time and commitment. So it can be, a multi-year plan to remedy some of these areas that have been inundated with invasive plants.
All right, so multiple years to try to keep the invasive plants out of there. I'm talking right now with Andrew Holsinger, a horticulture educator at the University of Illinois Extension. Let's take a break and we'll continue our conversation. That'll be coming up here on the WTIM Morning Show on your information station.
Your information station, WTIM.
It's now the RFD Radio Network. I'm Jim Taylor. We're in the red with corn, beans, and Chicago wheat at this hour. July corn down 7 3/4, 423 3/4. September corn down 7 1/4, 433, and December corn 452 1/2, down 7 1/4. July beans 11.31 1/4, down 22 3/4. August beans down 22 1/2, 11.35 3/4. November beans 11.46 1/2, down 20 3/4. July Chicago wheat 5.83 3/4, down 3 1/2. July KC wheat 6.19, down a nickel. July bean meal 314.60, down 6.20. July bean oil 77.02, down $1.69. Livestock trade August feeders 347.77, up 5.15. June live cattle up $1.67, 248.30. June lean hogs 95.12. Down 92 cents. Energy market, August Brent crude oil 94.95, down 286.
Looking for comfortable, affordable senior living in Taylorville? Rolling Meadows Senior Living now has an accessible unit available, designed for adults 62 and older. Rolling Meadows offers a smoke-free community with controlled access and 24-hour maintenance. Enjoy spacious kitchens with full-size appliances, convenient on-site laundry, and Wi-Fi in common areas. Call 217-287-2450 today to schedule your appointment. Rolling Meadows Senior Living is sponsored by Lutheran Social Services of Illinois and funded in part by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and the Federal Home Loan Bank of Chicago. Rolling Meadows is an equal opportunity provider.
Hi, everyone. Nicole Patrick here, your local country financial representative at 1305 West Bresser in Taylorville. I'm proud to recognize the Tornado student athletes that represent our community by being the exclusive sponsor of the WTIM Nicole Patrick Country Financial Player of the Game. During Tornado Sports broadcasts this school year, WTIM announcers will select a player at the end of each game who will receive a certificate for being named our Player of the Game. Good luck to all the teams this season, and go Tornadoes!
If you're 40 and over, you'll recognize these artists by their first names. Frank, Dean, Sammy, Andy, Nat, Diana, Michael. Well, here's the big news. You can now hear Central Illinois' largest music library with over 3,500 songs on air and online at 965thechill.com. Tune in on the FM dial in Christian County and on your computer or smartphone. Hear these great artists and many more 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on 965thechill.com.
Pana schools provide excellence in education and are rooted in the Pana community. Become a part of Panther Pride and find out the great things happening in Pana schools by clicking their icon at TaylorvilleDailyNews.com.
Jansen's Heating and Air is the home of Dr. Comfort, focusing on customer care for heating and air conditioning across Central Illinois for some 35 years. Find out their services, specials, and coupons by clicking their icon on TaylorvilleDailyNews.com.
WTIM.
We're back on the WTIM Morning Show on your information station. The show is sponsored by People's Bank and Trust, where they put people first, and Landmark of Taylorville. I'm your host, Reed Kamai, and I continue my conversation with Andrew Holsinger, a horticulture educator at the University of Illinois Extension. And we've been talking about invasive plants invasive plants, invasive species in native spaces, native spaces in nature. And the extension has got some classes coming up that are related to this topic. And Andrew, I'd love for you to tell our listeners a little more about them.
Yeah, we're going to have another invasive species management course. We had this course last year, was the first time it was offered. And we had pretty good reviews. People were very excited about the class, and it's a hybrid course. So there's some online instruction. There's an online instructional day on June 9th, and it's going to span the day. So 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. You can attend this instructional day, and it'll give you the basics of invasive species ecology, some of the identification practices of identifying these invasive plants, and management principles. But then on the next day, June 10th, we're going to have one of the regional field days here in Hillsboro, Illinois. At our Montgomery County Extension Office, we have a number of invasive plants that are surrounding us, and so we'll give a short time of tours, and we'll visit some other sites here in Hillsboro. We'll give some tool demonstrations on how to use the tools, what tools are used for invasive species removal, and lunch will be provided. The deadline for registration is coming up, though. You can register all the way up to the day before, June 8th. It'll cost you $25 to register, but that's going to include the lunch. And so I think it's very worthwhile to be able to come in person and see some of these invasive plants firsthand, see how they integrate into the landscape and what we can do to help prevent them or get rid of them as it be.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a good experience, and then folks get to get outside, and there's the lunch in there as well, as part of all of that on the field days. So no, that's really cool, and I hope you get a good turnout for that. Again, how much is it going to kind of tie into some of the things you talked about earlier in this segment?
Oh, it'll be very instrumental in tying it all together to give you some firsthand experience into what goes into the identification of the plants. It'll take a deeper dive into the material. There'll be resources that are provided, some instructional materials, some guides on some of these methods of control that we see. There are quite a few different kinds of control methods. We have foliar treatments where you treat the leaves. There's cut stump where the invasive is cut and then an herbicide is applied to the stump. And there's also basal bark where a wound is put into the trunk of the invasive and then the herbicide is sprayed onto that cut or that injury. So all kinds of different methods will be demonstrated. We have quite a list of invasives here to take a look at and identify and to become familiar with. So I think it'll be a really good opportunity for those that need some emphasis on identification, learning that. It's one thing to see it in a slide presentation, but to be here firsthand and to see the plants up close and what to do whenever you encounter those and how to get rid of them.
Yeah, and also getting that, hands-on and visual experience is certainly a step up from, just talking about it on the radio when you can't really see anything as well. So, looking, happy for you folks with that, and I look forward to hopefully hearing about it a little bit later. I'll tell you what, we're into the last just under a minute and a half, and I figured I'll just let you kind of summarize what you've discussed so far today before I let you go.
Yeah. Taking a look at the invasive plants that are around your area, the edge of your forest, is an important aspect that you need to look for methods of control, develop a strategy, and we have a lot of resources with the University of Illinois Extension to help you along your way to identify these plants and what to do to get rid of them.
Yeah, and it's definitely a lot to look into, and then you'll have the opportunity as well with the class that's coming up on June 9th. So that's the online instructional day, and then the field day as well in Hillsboro. That's going to be another part of it as well, all put on by the University of Illinois Extension. Andrew Holsinger, a horticulture educator with the University of Illinois Extension, has been my guest in this part of the show. Andrew, thanks again for coming on.
Always a pleasure.
Yes, it is a pleasure to have you on as well. And thank you for listening on the WTIM Morning Show on your information station. We'll be back at it tomorrow with another show, so we hope that you'll join at that point. For now, though, enjoy your day.
The Big 870 WTIM Assumption Taylorville. 96.1 FM Taylorville. 107.5 FM.